Start. Now, sir, honorable members will recall that the bill was introduced in the House of the People on the 2nd September 2003. It has had a long history and in the form or another it has been before the public since the end of 1949. In the statement of objects and reasons, the various stages through which the bill has passed since 1946 have been summarized, and I need not recapitulate on this occasion the circumstances in which the then Government of India took the decision in early 1946 to initiate an inquiry into the reform of our company law. I would remind honorable members that between 1946 and 1948, the entire field of company law was carefully reviewed by two distinguished company lawyers who were appointed to recommend the broad lines on which the present act should be revised. Their recommendations were examined in the then Ministry of Commerce, and certain tentative departmental views which emerged were circulated in a comprehensive memorandum to all recognized trade and industrial associations, bar associations, the high courts, and the state governments. That brought us to the end of 1949. Many representations on this memorandum were duly received from chambers of commerce, trade and industrial associations, state governments, and the general public. At the end of 2000, the Government of India appointed a committee under the chairmanship of Shri Bhabha to go into the entire question of the revision of the Companies Act with particular reference to its bearing on the development of trade and industry in this country. This committee examined a large number of witnesses in many parts of the country and submitted its report in March 2002. This report again was circulated to all state governments, chambers of commerce, trade associations, high courts, and many other bodies. At the same time, a special officer was appointed in the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, to examine the report in the light of the views received from the interested public and to submit proposals to government for the revision of the present act. The bill now before the House is based largely on the recommendations of the Company Law Committee, modified in a few particulars. Honorable members will notice that so far as public relations go, the bill has covered adequate ground. In a measure like the Companies Bill, however, which covers the entire field of the operation of joint stock companies, the limits of consultation and discussion can never be exhausted, and I would like to inform honorable member that although the bill was introduced in parliament over 7 months ago, our officers have been engaged throughout this period in further studies and informal discussions with the interests concerned, and on occasions I have also participated in such discussions. I have also given some further thought to some of the issues arising out of the bill, and I propose at the appropriate stage to bring before the select committee any changes in the provisions of the bill which seem to me to be worthy of consideration in the light of this further examination. Now, honorable members would have noticed that the bill contains 6 clauses and 12 schedules. I think it is probably one of the longest legislative measures in recent legislative history, but its size might be regarded as misleading unless I make a few comments. The bill is both, one must remember, a consolidating and amending measure. As mentioned in the statement of objects and reasons, this is the first opportunity which has occurred since 1923 for the consolidation of the Companies Act. Advantage has been taken of this opportunity to redraft several long and complicated sections in the present Act, which have been split up into a large number of clauses. This is the largest single factor accountable for the increase in the number of clauses in the bill. New clauses embodying substantial changes in the present law would hardly constitute more than a small fraction of the bill. I would also draw attention to the structural changes in the bill to which a reference has been made in the statement of objects and reasons. The redraft of the bill and the rearrangement of the existing chapters in the Companies Act in a more logical order have, I think, resulted in a noticeable improvement in the form of the bill, and I hope will facilitate better understanding and appreciation of the scheme. I wish that the Act, which came into effect long ago, was implemented properly. I know that the minister here is very earnest in implementing it. Start. I should like now to make a few observations on the budget. This budget marks a turning point in the history of our country. It is no use attempting, as some of my friends have done, either to deprecate the budget very strongly or to suggest that we are not witnessing a new revolution in our methods of fiscal training and technique. I want it to be quite clearly pointed out to my friends that we are now facing the lean years of Indian finance. Hitherto, we had revenue surpluses which were a form of public saving and which were meant to be utilized for capital development. Hereafter, this form of revenue surplus would not be available. We have therefore to find out ways and means of implementing our great program of national reconstruction at minimum cost. My point is that the deficit on revenue account would be of the order of about rupees 19 to 20 crores. Here, let me point out that I do not agree with those of my friends in the finance department who have attempted to suggest that rupees 9 or 18 crores which are obtained from Pakistan should be put to the revenue side of the budget. They are to be put on the capital side. But that does not seriously alter the trend of my argument. What I am suggesting is that we would have to be prepared for a deficit of a much higher order even on the revenue side. That itself should make us realize that there are very many problems which we have to face and that we have to undertake ways and means of increasing the resources of our country so that it might be possible for us to have a greater amount of surplus or a greater amount of public saving for the purpose of financing capital budget. The finance minister, in the course of his speech, Mr. Deputy Minister, pointed out that the deficits during the past 2 years were of the order of rupees 83 crores. I venture humbly to disagree with him because I feel that when we are talking of deficits, we must take into account the overall deficit incurred by the central government, and that would be of the order of rupees 200 crores. During the years of relatively light expenditure, we had a shortfall of about rupees 200 crores. Undoubtedly, now when we are going to have a very great amount of expenditure, we might have a greater amount of deficit and we would have to find out ways and means of trying to meet our capital expenditure. Some members have pointed out that deficit financing is good. Others have pointed out that it is poison. One honorable member who preceded me pointed out that it could be taken like a tonic. Now, I am not willing to enter into the merits of deficit financing or demerits of deficit financing in an academic spirit. The time has now come when we should face realities. I do suggest that we have to indulge in deficit financing because without indulging in deficit financing, it would not be possible for us to indulge in capital expenditure on such a large scale. But when we are talking of the scope of deficit financing, I would like to place before the House and the Finance Minister the two great limitations which face us. The first limitation that faces us is that concerning the internal price level. The Honorable the Finance Minister referred to the cost of living. He said that he was going to keep a watch over the cost of living so that it may not shoot up within a short period and make a mess of the plans of capital development. But there is another limitation which has also to be borne in mind, a limitation which has not received as much notice as it should have done in all the discussions that have taken place on deficit financing. That limitation is the external limitation or the limitation which arises on account of our balance of payments position. I think this is an important, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the internal price level, and I should like to elaborate that particular point a bit more because I feel that a time will shortly arrive when we might have either to reconsider our policy or might even have to leave the sterling club of which we are a member. The second serious limitation is as serious as the first. What would be the consequences of deficit financing on our balance of payments? The Finance Minister, in his budget speech, points out that so far as the balance of payments position is concerned, they have now, whether it is by accident or design, a favorable balance. I am thankful to you for having given me this opportunity long last to say a few words on the budget. Already much has been said, and I think the Finance Minister has come in for his share of congratulations as well as criticisms. So, there is not very much to say, but I should like to say a few words. The increased development expenditure and the absence of any new taxation has earned for the budget a good response even from the businessmen. I especially welcome the relief given to the middle classes by raising the exemption limit of income tax in respect of personal income. No doubt, this is some relief to the middle classes. But I would request the finance minister if he could to raise this exemption limit from rupees 40,000 to rupees 60,000, as that would give substantial relief to the middle classes. I am indeed glad that the Taxation Inquiry Commission has been appointed with Dr. John Mathai as the chairman, and I am sure that many of the vexed problems may be solved through this commission. At the same time, I would request the finance minister and put off the estate duty bill for the present, since this inquiry commission has been appointed and they may go into this question. For I feel that it is not an opportune moment to put on more taxes on the people. Already, as Mr. Gadgil has pointed out, there are so many taxes on the people. The people are overburdened by taxes and they are just trying to recover their stability. So, in regard to estate duty, I would ask him to consider about it. My reason for asking it to be postponed is, as I have said, that the people are still facing economic distress, and then our government is not able to offer the amenities which other countries have, where the estate duty exists, such as free compulsory education for children, free medical aid, homes for the poor and the destitute, old age pension, etc. So, my humble suggestion is that this point may be considered by the Taxation Inquiry Commission. I agree that there is a brighter side of the picture, and that instead of continually harping on our poverty, we should also see the bright side. We are making encouraging progress towards laying the foundation of a welfare state. With the cooperation of all, the implementation of the 5-year plan, I am sure, sir, that we should be able to lay the foundations and fulfill the dreams of India. It is indeed encouraging to know from the finance minister that there is a tendency of lowering food prices all over the world, and in that case the prices in our country too would be lowered. Regarding defense, for obvious security reasons, I do not agree with my friends who say that the expenditure should be curtailed. It is not advisable to take any undue risks and slacken the defense arrangements. Indeed, defense is one of our valuable assets, although, strange to say, there seems to be adverse opinion in some quarters. I agree with what General Cariappa once said, that God and army are remembered only when there is trouble. The army consists of the most disciplined and loyal set of young men. It would not be proper to effect economy in the pay of these brave officers, as it would not be an incentive for the right type of young men to join the army, and it would become ineffective and inefficient. I believe already officers who were drawing rupees 14,000 as their pay are now getting only rupees 17,000 and about rupees 1,000 as allowance. That is, they are getting about half of what they were getting before. It is very hard for those officers on field duty to establish separate establishments for their families and for their children, and I would especially appeal to the finance minister to see that the family allowances may be restored to those officers who are on field duty. Economy in army could be effected in other ways. There is scope for more efficient operation of defense industries, which process seems slow, and by purchase policy of utilizing goods and stores indigenously manufactured. Preference should be given to our country made war materials, such as could be produced here, and they would be cheaper than foreign made goods. I may also suggest that the armed forces who are not on field service or under any operational commitments could be utilized for giving military training to the youths in schools and colleges, which would teach discipline and loyalty. The university authorities should make military training as part of their compulsory education, just as they have adopted social, domestic, and political sciences. Sir, the Essential Commodities Act was passed 5 years ago, and when the minister yesterday came with an amending bill, we expected that he would give us a brief report on the working of this measure for the last few years. But unfortunately, we are kept in the dark in regard to the exact working of the act and the nature of the difficulties the minister is facing. Sir, as far as I know, many of the provisions of this enactment have been observed more in violation by his agents at the state level. The food minister may be very earnest may be very able and may be very anxious to see that the various provisions of the Act are implemented in the most effective manner at the state level, but unfortunately, his agents at the state level are not equally enthusiastic or equally anxious to observe the provisions of this enactment. The most important objectives of this enactment are to control the supply and distribution of commodities and to maintain a stable price level. In regard to both these aspects, I am afraid that the government has failed to realize the objectives in view. Some time passed when there was scarcity of food grains. Attempts were made to make procurement from certain wholesale merchants and from rice mills. In my own state, I know of many instances of such procurement where, after making known that certain things had to be done and certain steps had to be taken by the merchant community, nothing was done later on by the government when they found that these very orders of the government were violated. As a result of the violations, there was a consequent rise in the prices of food grains. In respect of other commodities like iron and steel, paper, etc., we see a lot of speculative activities, but the provisions of the Act have not been brought to bear on them. Perhaps no case of prosecution was launched against those people who contravened the various provisions of the Act. We are interested to know in how many cases the government have taken steps to prosecute individuals who have violated the various sections of the Act. The minister said that the powers under the Act were not adequate. We sympathize with the food minister, but I want to know what action has been taken in this regard by the various state governments. In regard to the amending provision, I want to know from the minister what would be his difficulty even if minor offences are taken to courts of law. For instance, the Motor Vehicles Act deals with various offences, both major and minor, and various minor offences under the Act are taken to courts and people are prosecuted. What is the difficulty in taking these cases of a minor nature to courts of law? There, the people will have some safety that they will get a hearing, and if the offences are really offences, then they would be prosecuted. Otherwise, they will be acquitted. Here, the minister says that there should be a security deposit. If there is a violation of a particular provision of the enactment, then the executive authority will have the power either to confiscate a part of the amount or the whole of the amount. We are clothing the executive authority with more powers. I do not grudge giving powers to the executive authority provided they are used properly and effectively and in a most fair manner. But unfortunately, there have been discriminations apart from the ineffectiveness of the various provisions. Wherever these provisions were used, there had been discriminatory use of these provisions against a few or in favor of a few. Normally, when officers are clothed with more powers, there is large scope for corruption. I feel that it would be desirable to avoid such malpractices, and it would be desirable, I think, that even for minor offences, the parties should have a chance to defend their actions. I do not think that this problem of dealing with minor offences will become complex or complicated in any way if we take them to courts of law. I want a reply from the minister in what way he is suffering from a handicap in dealing with minor offences or offences of a technical nature. The honorable member made the point that even if this thing was acceptable to the House, he did not know what amount would be demanded as security. So, the minister should tell us what amount is normally expected from a licensee in all cases and what the offences are which are of a technical or minor nature which he has in view. We are not told which are major offences and which are minor offences. Clarifications on these points are necessary. The Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948 was good so far as it went, but unfortunately, the spirit of it could not be understood or appreciated by the common man in this country. So, a new orientation of this policy was given, and the Honorable Prime Minister, after his return from China, publicly declared that the future policy of the country, or rather the future pattern of society, will be the socialist pattern. That was further emphasized by the resolution passed at the Avdi session of the Congress and later reiterated by Shri Debar, President of the Indian National Congress. I am very glad to say that the spirit of it has been caught by the nation today. If I may say so, the nation has taken up the challenge for securing the socialist pattern of society. It behoves all sections, both inside this house as well as outside, without having mutual recriminations to try and propagate in a sincere manner and establish the socialist pattern of society indicated by the statements of the great leaders of our country. It may be relevant and pertinent if I refer to a few sentences from the memorandum presented on the 4th June 1999 by our Prime Minister, who was the chairman of the All India Planning Committee, which came into existence when there was full autonomy in the states. On pages 39 and 40 of that report, he stated, "It is clear that the drawing up of a comprehensive national plan becomes clearly an academic exercise with no relation to reality unless the planning authority or those to whom it is responsible are in a position to give effect to the plan. If this authority is powerless or circumscribed or restricted and has limited activities, it cannot plan. An essential prerequisite for planning is thus complete freedom and independence for the country and removal of all outside control. This implies that the country possesses in itself full sovereign authority to take any measures, adopt any policies, and form any relations with other countries as may seem best to its governing authority in the interests of the country and its people. National independence is thus an indispensable preliminary for taking all the steps that might be found necessary for carrying out the 5-year plan in all its various aspects throughout the whole country. At the present moment, it is clear that not only have we in India no national independence, but we are hedged in and obstructed by numerous restrictions, limitations, safeguards, and reservations which block the path to planning and progress. Our plan for national development must therefore be drawn up for a free and independent India. Thanks to the sacrifices made by millions of our countrymen and countrywomen under the leadership of the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, we have today secured complete sovereign political independence at a time when the nations of the world were engaged in the bitterest struggle using all the weapons of destruction. If, therefore, we have secured political independence during the period of a quarter of a century, it should not be difficult, especially when we are today masters in our own country, to secure a socialist pattern of society as has already been indicated. But it requires the assistance, the propaganda, the active work of all those who are interested in this. I am sure so long as my honorable friends, the minister, the deputy minister, and the other minister who represent the Commerce and Industry Ministry can give us an assurance that the capitalist pattern would be avoided. Some of us who believe in a cent% socialist democracy give an undertaking that certainly totalitarian policy will not be introduced in this country, because we have believed all along during the fight that we have given to the British government when we secured political independence, that we shall try to maintain democracy undiluted, and a socialist democracy at that. I am absolutely certain that in this country of ours, liberty of thought, liberty of speech, and liberty of action will be guaranteed to every citizen to express his views in the manner he pleases. I therefore assure my honorable friend that so long as we do not, in the garb of a socialistic pattern, support a capitalist system, India will stand 100% for a socialist democracy. Now, luckily for us, the fundamental rights of the Constitution have declared that its citizen would be assured of many of the social amenities which will give reasonable comfort from the womb to the grave. But mere enunciation, as I have said many times, will not satisfy the common man unless the saying is put into effect. I am absolutely certain, therefore, that so long as there is determination, there has been some reference to the improvement in our economic situation also. We find that we have made good progress in production. We were faced equally with a difficult situation so far as cloth was concerned. There was a deficit of food, and there was also shortage of cloth. I do remember the scenes that we had to witness in several cities where people had to stand in queues for hours together for 2 meters of very ordinary cloth. But now the situation is quite changed. We have produced much cloth, and we are in a position to export cloth. During the British period, we were required to import cloth, but now we are in a position to export cloth. After partition, we were faced with the question of raw material, namely cotton. We had cotton mills, but cotton remained in Pakistan. Even that problem has been solved. We had placed before us a target for more production of cotton, and not only has that target been achieved, but it has been achieved in shorter period to the satisfaction of all people in the country. From this survey, sir, you will find that everybody should be convinced that we are making good progress in the realization of the objectives of the 5-year plan. Then there is a reference that in several essential commodities we have got increased production. This cannot be denied. In spite of this increased production, I must admit we have not been able to solve the question of unemployment, but efforts are being made to ease the situation so far as this question is concerned. The main thing to which I would like to refer is that the president was pleased to say and say very plainly that so far as cottage industries were concerned, we have not been able to make good progress. As a matter of fact, very little progress has been made. If in this country we have to solve the question of unemployment, we must take very seriously to the development of cottage industries. That alone will solve this problem of unemployment. We want to increase production, but we want to take to such means for increasing our production as would be man absorbing and not man saving, as have been resorted to by the Western countries. That alone will solve our problem to a very great extent. If we organize our cottage industries, if we take to the spirit of Swadeshi, I have no doubt we will solve the problem of unemployment to a great extent. Then, sir, a reference has been made to certain additional projects which have been included in the 5-year plan. There was a great demand from Maharashtra to include this project in the 5-year plan. A couple of years ago, there was a conference presided over by my colleague from the district, the present Revenue Minister of Maharashtra. He had presided over it, and there was a unanimous demand supported by practically the entire people from Maharashtra that this project should be included in the 5-year plan. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Government of India and the Government of Maharashtra for having seen to it that this project in Maharashtra is included in the 5-year plan. The President's address makes a reference to the improvement of our transport and communications. Our increased production leads to the question of better transport facilities. The agricultural production is on the increase, but, sir, if there is no betterment of our transport facilities, this increased production in agriculture will not benefit the agriculturist. In my part of the country, even now this situation prevails. The production there is on the increase, but the agriculturists are suffering on account of inadequate facilities of railway transport. I was glad to find from the President's address that the railways are thinking of opening even new lines very soon. It has also been said that so far as locomotives and rolling stock are concerned, the manufacture of these is ongoing very satisfactorily, and we have made good progress in this respect during the last few years. Any nation can be proud of this achievement. Then there is a reference to the housing conditions. We can very well remember the scenes that we were required to witness immediately after partition. Thousands and tens of thousands of our brethren came to this country from Pakistan. It was a very serious question as to how to house them, but the day has come when the question has practically been solved, or it can at least be said that we are near the solution of the question. 72 crores of rupees have been spent during the last few years in constructing houses for the refugees. Now, I would like to say that with this measure we are now adopting, to my mind, it will not be possible to have this system or any other system functioning effectively. The number of clauses that we have included are so restrictive and rigid that it will not be possible for any system to function in this country. If at all it is able to function, it will be able to function with a lot of difficulties. It will be said afterwards that the industrial sector, particularly the private sector, has not been able to deliver the goods. I would like to warn the government that if anything happens in the future in which industrial production or production in the private sector has not gone up, it would be not because of any lack of efforts on the part of the private sector, but because of the measure that we are now adopting. I have mentioned several times how this particular bill is very restrictive and how it will hamper the normal growth of companies in this country. It is a pity that when we are on the threshold of the 10th 5-year plan, such a measure should be passed in this house. I would now like to make a few observations about the speeches of some of the honorable members here. Shri Ashok Mehta justifies the restrictions on managing agents by saying that managing agents are no longer the main source of finance. He also argues that profits have been high and will continue to remain high, and therefore he would like to see the managing agents being paid on a sliding scale. He is in the habit of referring to a number of books and making quotations from a number of them published in America or in other countries, and particularly by some of the professors. I would also like to mention to him that even when companies are floated, it requires a certain amount of confidence amongst the investing public, and it is because a particular firm is managing a particular company that this confidence is created in the investing public. Even there, as the Honorable Finance Minister has said, there is a sort of overall tight control. New banks and insurance companies are not floated nowadays. What you have are the few banks which are existing and the few insurance companies that are existing. The other point is that the credit worthiness of the managing agency firm does not count to a certain extent in getting credit from the banks and other financial institutions. Yesterday, it was mentioned by my honorable friend that the crux of the problem is the question of payment of remuneration to a particular managing agency system. He said that in this bill, a definite encouragement has been given to the alternative type of management, namely the managing director or the manager, where an individual has been permitted to take 5%, while in the case of the managing agency, it has been permitted to take about 10%. I would like to point out to him that it is not merely the question of remuneration which will decide the alternative type of management. The remuneration is not a very important thing unless and until you allow a certain amount of flexibility for any system to function. It will not be possible to evolve any other system to take the place of the managing agency system. In spite of so many shackles, you may find that those few business houses which are carrying on now may have to carry on the present basis. You may not find many new people coming in the field. Several times it has been mentioned in this house why the business community has not prescribed for itself a code of conduct. In this connection, I would like to point out that a degree or diploma is essential for the profession, and in case of violation of the code, sanction should be provided by it to prevent a person from practicing the profession. Today, even Ashoka Mehta and Shri C. C. Shah can set up a grocery shop and become businessmen. Nobody lays down any condition for starting business, and nobody can prevent others from continuing it. But I would like to point out that with regard to the code of conduct, there is a certain amount of ethics, and there are certain standards and traditions on which business houses function. If a particular firm has not got proper ways of managing its business, you will find that that business house will find it difficult to function, and it would be difficult for it to command the confidence of the business community. It would not be possible for it to function as effectively as a firm.